During the Second World War, there was an incredible advancement in military technologies and weapon systems. Italy, for its part, was at the forefront of developing various types of naval assault crafts, with the maiali and the explosive motorboats among the most well-known. A much lesser-known vessel, never tested in action, was the small CA-type submarine, that in theory should have taken part in an attack against New York Harbor in 1943. But let's proceed with order right after the intro, and if you appreciate the content here, please consider subscribing and pushing the like button. At the end of the 1930s, the Caproni company, known for its aeronautical constructions, ventured outside this field and developed the project of a midget submarine with the displacement of 13 tons, 10 meters long, and with a two-man crew. The boat had a resistant hull with 8 shaped sections, and extreme semi-spherical bulk, external non-resistant double bottoms, and external cages for launching 2 torpedoes. The lower part of the resistant hull was exclusively intended for housing the batteries, almost another double bottom. Regarding propulsion, the CA relied on a 60 horsepower diesel engine and a 25 horsepower electric motor, which in theory would have guaranteed a maximum speed of 7 knots surfaced and 2 submerged. The range was 700 miles surfaced at a speed of 4 knots and dropped to 57 miles at 2 knots with electric propulsion while submerged. The operating depth of the boat was estimated to be about 55 meters. The vessel had a sort of small conning tower that actually served as the jacket for the fixed periscope, which was 2.5 meters long. Like the Type A and B midget submarines operated by the Regia Marina in the Great War, these new units would have been used as a harbor defense or to ambush enemy ships in specific choke points not far from the Italian coasts. After the Great War and the unsuccessful experience with the Type A and B boats, the Regia Marina was no longer interested in this type of units. However, in 1937, thanks to slight pressures exercised by Caproni on the government and on the armed forces, 2 prototypes were ordered and delivered to the Navy in April 1938. The first tests carried out in the Venice lagoon led the Navy experts to believe that the CA was too fragile and lacked sufficient maneuverability to conduct offensive actions against moving targets. These small boats did not prove very seaworthy and could not maintain periscope depth with sea state 3. In such sea conditions, even the rolling and pitching movements made life on board unbearable after a short time. Transferred by train to La Spezia, the 2 CAs underwent further tests, which, however, confirmed the problems already encountered in the waters of Venice. Here, some initial modification had also been made, such the installation of a new 4.5 meters periscope and other interventions to the torpedo launching system, which however brought no significant improvements. Finally, in autumn 1939, with several issues still unsolved, the 2 units were taken ashore and closed in a Navy depot in La Spezia. Despite the unsatisfactory outcome of the CA project, the Caproni company did not give up in the construction of submarines, and, based on the experience earned with the CA testing, the company developed a new type of midget submarines, labeled CB, or Caproni Type B. These were larger units that overcame the problems of their predecessors, but this is another story that I will address in a future video. In the course of World War II, the elite Italian unit called 10th MIS Flotilla gained a lot of experience in raiding enemy ports with special assault crafts, or frogmen. This led some of its officers to think that the flotilla needed a small underwater craft to support the actions of frogmen armed with small explosive charges, known as gamma men. The inspirers were Commander Angelo Belloni, the inventor of Italian individual breathing devices, and Eugenio Volk, commander of the Gamma Men section of the 10th MIS. Their idea was to use a small midget submarine to infiltrate the enemy port and safely release a small group of gamma men who would have attacked enemy ships with explosive charges transported by the submarine, attached outside the hull. This solution would have saved the swimmers a lot of fatigue and risks, and increased the number of explosives transported. The 10th MIS initially asked to use a couple of CB boats to start the experiments, but the request was denied. On the other hand, in September 1941, the 10th MIS received the two older CA, named CA1 and CA2. The two small boats needed repairs and modifications, which were carried out at the Caproni factories. The periscope and the small turret were removed and replaced with a dome-shaped hatch fitted with glass plates to see through. The diesel engine was also removed at once, saving more internal space, while a more powerful electric engine was installed. The torpedo launching systems were replaced by a special system for carrying 8 100 kg explosive charges. A hatch was added to the keel for the gamma men to exit the boat. The modifications on CA2 were completed in November 1941, and the boat was transferred to the Caproni plant on Lake Iseo to carry out the tests. Experimentations and further adjustments followed until February 1942, which finally gave a rather satisfactory result, despite the fact that the boat was still quite fragile and required continuous tuning and maintenance. The CA1 arrived later, but an accident occurred during the tests, delayed their completion, and the boat was ready only at the end of summer 1942. In that period, the Reggio Marina understood that once properly tuned, it would have been possible to use the CAs effectively, and in the spring of 1942, the Navy ordered 2 more boats from the Caproni, modified according to the new specification resulting from the tests on the original CA. The design of these new boats followed slightly different plans as regards both the dimensions of the hull and the arrangements of the external double bottoms, which, in the new version, gave the hull more rational and streamlined shapes. The containers for the 8 charges were brought higher to make their handling easier. A further improvement came with the placing of the horizontal rudders on the bow section to improve the overall maneuverability. Their absence was one of the major shortcomings of the original CAs. Given the still experimental nature of the CA, fitted as frogmen carrier, the 10th MIS flotilla decided to use it against an Allied port located in the Atlantic. These ports were considered less defended and guarded than those in the Mediterranean, which had already suffered attacks by assault craft and therefore had significantly improved their defenses. In July 1942, the CA2 was sent by train to the Besançon base in Bordeaux, and there the submarine Leonardo da Vinci underwent a series of modifications to serve as a mother submarine for the CA. The forward gun was removed, and in its place a 10-meter-long basin was built, equipped with 2 clamps for holding the CA. From the 9th to the 23rd of September 1942, the Leonardo da Vinci, under the command of Gianfranco Gazzanapri a Roggia, carried out a series of trials at sea where it tested the transport, release and recovery of the CA. In this period, the mother submarine was jokingly renamed Kangaroo. After some initial difficulties, the tests proved successful, and the idea of launching an attack against an Allied port in the Atlantic gained momentum, identifying Freetown and New York as possible targets. However, since the collection of information about the aforementioned Allied ports was still in its early stages, it was decided to wait for the completion of the new CAs, number 3 and number 4, which were more robust and less worn than the original boats. The Da Vinci was then put back in condition to operate against enemy traffic and soon returned to sea, but she was eventually lost with the commander and the entire crew in May 1943. It was therefore necessary to identify another boat to carry out the operation. Meanwhile, the new CA boats had been delivered to the Navy in January 1943 and had begun sea trials in La Spezia shortly after. Meanwhile, the collection of information proceeded slowly amid several difficulties. According to the available sources, the action against New York was planned for December 1943. The mother submarine was meant to cross the Atlantic and reach the American port, near the estuary of the Hudson River. Here, the Kangaroo would have released the CA, carrying a Gamma man inside. They were tasked with mining the merchant ships at anchor in the area. In such circumstances, the recovery of the CA was considered extremely difficult, so the hypothesis of scuttling the midget submarine at the end of the action was seriously considered. It goes without saying that the attack, if successful, would have constituted a psychological and propaganda victory for the Axis, certainly not a strategic one. Inevitably, the strategic setbacks suffered by the Axis in the spring and summer 1943 culminated with the armistice between Italy and the Allies in September, doomed the project forever. On the date of the armistice, the CA-1 and the 2 units of the second series were still in La Spezia, where they were likely scuttled, although sources do not agree on this point. It appears that 1 unit, recovered in the following months, was sent to Germany for technical evaluations. The CA-2 remained abandoned in Bordeaux and was found by the Allies on a train carriage when they liberated the city. Although they were never actually used in action during the war, the concept of a midget submarine carrying combat swimmers has endured. The British even tested a similar concept with some success, using their X-crafts against battleship tirpitz. Underwater crafts of this type have been developed during the Cold War up to the present day. They provide a mean of supporting the special forces of various countries operating in the marine environment. And it must be said that Italy has certainly followed up on its tradition in terms of developing assault crafts. I hope you have enjoyed this story and look forward to bringing you more content on this channel. Please consider subscribing and pushing the like button.